Hello, I'm Derek Rickert. This is Blockswap Buzz, and I'm here with Nathan Worsley.
Hey everyone, I'm Nathan Worsley, CEO of Convexity and widely known as the Salmonella guy.
Salmonella guy sounds deadly. So question, what could you just explain to everybody what you do, and maybe a little bit about what you find exciting about it, maybe why you do it, how you got into it a little.
Yeah, my primary role is managing a team which is extracting MEV. So I got into this a couple of years ago, about 6 months prior to the Flashbot's inception. I was working as a solo searcher for some time, just running atomic strategies, mostly arbitrage. And then after the Flashbot's MEV became a lot more popular, the strategy set expanded, and I started a team. And we've covered most of the ground with searching strategies, apart from sandwiching, which we don't do, arbitrage, liquidations, and lately more statistical strategies. So I think I've had experience across the broad spectrum of MEV.
Great. So just if we could take a step back for the people who maybe aren't as familiar with MEV, could you explain that simply, but I guess not too simply, maybe as if it's somebody, if I'm somebody who owns ETH sitting on Coinbase, I'm thinking about staking with CB ETH or something, maybe some other liquid derivative, but that's about my knowledge. How would you catch me up to speed with MEV?
Yeah, I guess the question of what is MEV, the prior question is kind of what is blockchain. And I see blockchain as a game theoretic system. So it's a repeated game that is played between economic actors. And it's a game theoretic system which aligns the behavior of rational and selfish people to create some kind of social good, typically distributed consensus or distributed compute or whatever else you can arise from a blockchain. And I would define MEV as any financial incentive which drives or rewards the behavior of the economic actors of a blockchain network. So this would include the value that you can get from inserting transactions, say arbitrage, liquidations, whatever, from reordering transactions, say custom construction of a block, to censoring transactions. And I'd include the block reward and transaction fees as MEV as well. So just broadly, any financial value that provides an incentive to economic actors who are part of the blockchain game. I don't know if that's a explain it like I'm five explanation, but I think that's the most true explanation I can give of what MEV is. It's a property essentially that emerges whenever you have consensus that is distributed.
Yeah, um, I think you did a great job. I'm not five, I have ETH and Coinbase, so I've definitely done something and have some understanding. So it sounds like you have a little bit of a unique perspective and viewpoint on MEV compared to other people, as you're somebody who actually spends time extracting MEV and spends time harvesting some of this profit. What do you think is the role of somebody collecting MEV in the ecosystem? Is it provide benefit to users, or is it really only beneficial to the individual? And does it help make markets more efficient? Like how do you see yourself fitting into the broader Ethereum ecosystem?
I think MEV by itself is kind of a neutral force. As I said, it's a property. So it isn't intrinsically like good or bad, but it does have externalities. So those externalities can be both positive and negative. Positive, as you said, driving market efficiency. There's a lot of liquidity and a lot of price correlation between different DEXs and different financial instruments as a result of MEV. Same with some protocols require MEV to actually function, like liquidation protocols, for example require someone to come along and actually make the market. You don't want people to have bad debt, to borrow money and escape without paying it back. So you actually require MEV to incentivize a trader to come in and make the market. But those are positive externalities. and of course there can be negative externalities as well. So sandwich trading is probably a good example of a negative externality. Users set their slippage when they use Uniswap v2 or some other DEX with this expectation that the slippage will allow them to still execute their trade if the price is moving slightly before they actually get executed. But in fact, the MEV trader might come along and take that slippage and execute them at the worst possible price that they're willing to take. You could also say that there's some other negative externalities incentivizing reorgs or some contention on the frontier of the blockchain itself. So while I think, yeah, MEV itself is neutral, there's definitely negative and positive externalities to it. I like to
Okay.
think that what I do falls into the positive externality side. I don't sandwich and generally don't engage in any MEV strategy, which I think has negative externalities for the chain itself. But I do, of course, freely admit that it is an extractive and profit-driven activity. It's like you're incentivized to make profit, but it's the byproduct is that you have some externality that's positive that you're providing to the network. And I think good design of protocols should base itself around using these positive externalities properly, incentivizing MEV traders to have a positive effect on the security of the network.
Okay, so from your viewpoint, I'm kind of understanding it's MEV is inherently neutral, though maybe there's a few aspects that have maybe some moral or ethical, you know, holdups to them. How how can those ones that maybe aren't the most beneficial have like be changed or prevented, or is that something that'll always be there? There'll always be somebody looking to sandwich attack or basically provide a negative value to some users just to extract a little bit more value. Should they even be prevented? Should we keep this completely open? What are your thoughts?
I think if there is value to be extracted, people will come and try and extract it. That's just the nature of economics. We all agree that sandwiches are bad, but like if there's profits to be made from sandwiching, people will extract those profits. And I think it's a bad take to try and rely on social consensus to enforce things, to say, okay, this is bad and we should just make it like known that it's a bad thing and like hope that people will do the right thing and not extract this type of MEV. The fix really is to fix things on a protocol level. So either looking at the way that preferences flow into blocks and how we can adjust the incentives as preferences flow to blocks. So you have PBS as an example is trying to like minimize some of the negative externalities by adjusting the preference flow into consensus. And then of course, on the dApp level, it's also up to the people who are actually creating these protocols to try and become MEV aware and think about the effects that MEV is going to have on their protocol, the types of MEV that their protocol is going to emit, and work with that in the protocol design. You can see this, for example, in the move from Uniswap v2 to Uniswap v3 with the concentrated liquidity, which really disincentivized traditional sandwiching, although it did incentivize a new form of sandwiching with just-in-time liquidity. But yeah, ultimately, most of the MEV that is on the table is really there because of the people who are building the protocols that users are interacting with. And I think they have the biggest responsibility to be MEV aware and design fixes that minimize negative externalities and promote positive ones.
Okay, thank you. Lot to unpack there. I guess my question to that is you're talking a lot about how this can be solved at the protocol level. But this is a decentralized ecosystem, which is great. Any actor can do whatever they want. Is it possible that protocols might be designed in a way to increase MEV opportunities? Has anybody done that? Or has it been very much for the betterment of the user? People are moving towards trying to remove MEV, and as they're removing MEV, does that kind of make you a little bit nervous about your position in the market, or are you sure you'll always find some place that you can make some revenue?
I think if you're driven and competitive, there's always going to be a way for you to make money trading. So I'm sort of not worried about that aspect. Like, sure, the microstructure of the market changes all the time. Some strategies become unprofitable. Some strategies emerge which become profitable. Wherever the money is there and the MEV is there to be extracted, I'll move there. But onto your point about protocol design itself, I don't think protocol designers should aim to emit less MEV from their protocol, more to think about the effect that emitting MEV has. So you can harness MEV for very positive uses. A good example of that might be, say, Gelato protocol, where they're incentivizing MEV as a way to use to run tasks on the blockchains. They say, okay, I need this task, for example, to fire every 10 minutes, and I'm going to emit some MEV to incentivize someone to actually submit the transaction, which is keeping the task running. So this is an example of like a positive use case of MEV. There's a lot of ways that MEV can kind of be harnessed as a force for good. But yeah, you are right that it's a complex microstructure on blockchain. There's always going to be negative externalities of MEV, no matter how you handle the protocol design. And those are the sorts of things I think you need to address on the preference level, looking at how preferences from users flow all the way into consensus, and how can we build protocols around preferences that are minimizing the negative externalities.
Okay, so you mentioned something pretty interesting. You said harnessing MEV as a force of for good. Could you unpack that a little bit? What do you mean by that? How can that be harnessed? Is that in reference to the end user, or is that just for the general market? What would that look like for you?
Well, MEV traders are proactive, right? So they see like some opportunity and they take some action. So an example of like harnessing MEV for good is when you actually want that to happen. So you offer MEV essentially as a reward for that to happen. Like in the example I gave before, you might want something to happen every 10 minutes on the blockchain. Blockchains have smart contracts, right? But smart contracts don't do things by themselves. They actually need someone to interact with them. So how do you ensure that someone is going to interact with your smart contract every 10 minutes and do some kind of functionality? We can emit MEV as a reward, right? So that's an example of like harnessing MEV for a good purpose. It's saying, okay, MEV causes people to do things. So I can use MEV as an incentive to cause people to do things that I want. And I mean, the arbitrage and driving market efficiency and price discovery is like one example of that, right? You're saying, okay, it would be nice if prices were the same on different dexes. Well, MEV is like naturally causing that, right? Through natural incentives. Like that's not even necessarily by design. It's like profit to be made from price discovery and aligning prices on different dexes, and MEV searchers are willing to take that action. So being MEV aware is just about thinking about the incentives that your protocol provides to people and how you can make sure that those incentives are good.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's something almost similar, in traditional markets. There's dark pools and arbitrage and a lot of the things you're talking about, but it doesn't seem like they're as front and center or even talked about as much as MEV is within Ethereum. Um, do you think that's just because Ethereum's so decentralized and open and people have these discussions, or is there something inherently different here that needs to be discovered and discussed?
There's a lot of corollaries between traditional markets and blockchains. Even though they go by different names, a lot of the activities are the same, right? Like in TradFi, there's arbitrage trading, there's liquidations, there's front running, and so on. But the big difference between blockchain and traditional finance is generally the structural advantage that certain firms enjoy. So in traditional finance, if you want to get involved in front running or arbitrage or whatever, you tend to need billions of dollars in capital, and you need to be like quite an established firm. And these firms typically also have some level of regulatory capture where they have some influence over regulations as well. So it's big players that are very well capitalized that are doing these kinds of activities. One thing that is very unique about blockchain is that the barriers to entry are a lot lower. So a kid in his basement who's just very intelligent can participate in MEV and be an MEV extractor. And I think that level of access and the lower barriers to entry is how MEV became such a hot topic.
Great. So,
Sort of cheaper play situation, essentially.
so when we're looking at some of these MEV strategies, I know you had mentioned sandwiching and arbitrage, and you mentioned a bunch of different ones. Um, how repeatable are these strategies? Are some of them sort of a one-off, or how many different types of MEV strategies are there? Is it pretty siloed? Everybody's fairly aware that you can arbitrage here, you can sandwich here. How do these ideas expand? How do new ideas come up for MEV, and how do they fit within the ecosystem?
MEV strategies broadly segment into long tail and short tail strategies. So short tail strategies are the strategies that are sort of like known. Everyone sees them. They're generally like very constant and regular. They're very competitive as well. So arbitrage and liquidation and sandwiching are examples of shorter tail strategies. And even though these like there aren't that many genres, there is a lot of nuance within those genres. There's arbitrage across all the different types of pools. There's sandwiches that can become very exotic. There's like very edge case styles of arbitrage, such as arbitraging new pools as they're created. But yeah, generally those sorts of strategies are like very well established and known and transparent to everyone. Then on the longer tail side, it's a more of a research focused endeavor where these are things that might, as you said, come around once every week, once every month, or whatever, or maybe only once ever. And these are often a process of thinking and research. Someone says, okay, this MEV might exist, it might be extractable. They engage in somewhat of a research process to validate that, and then build software that's just geared around this one time or this irregular extraction. The thing about extracting MEV is you can't obfuscate it very easily. It's very transparent. So once you do something, if you make a lot of money, other people will see that, and the strategies are generally easy to contest. So there's this principle that like profit doesn't stay in the market for long. If you start making a bunch of money, competitors emerge very quickly, and it's a very competitive process. People are quite skilled and adept at extracting MEV. So you have a fight on your hands to sustain any kind of long-term edge.
So how how do you prevent other people from taking your strategies? And I'm also curious, at what point in the process are these strategies discovered and people kind of taking those from you? And is that preventable? How would it be prevented? Are there tools you'd like to see created? How does that look?
I guess there's two sort of like perspectives I can give you here. There's like the perspective as a searcher, which of course is one of like you want to develop a moat. And there's the perspective of like what do I think is best for blockchain? And those perspectives don't always align. What is best for blockchain, I think, is to have a very open and permissive markets where it's easy for people to enter, and there's not any sort of long-term durable edge. But of course, as a searcher, you are always trying to establish some kind of long-term durable moat. So I mean, the obvious moats is like just the experience that you have and the software that you've developed. That becomes somewhat of a technical and intellectual moat. But of course, searchers are also concentrating on getting vertical and horizontal moats. So horizontal moats is like performing a lot of different types of MEV extraction at the same time. With block building and other bundles, for example, you can wrap a lot of things together and you can gain an advantage there. Or vertical moats, so integrating with like validators or going up and down the vertical stack. So these tend to be the moats that you work on developing.
Got it. So, Nathan, given everything that's going on with AI, I guess I'm kind of curious your general thoughts about AI, artificial intelligence. Yeah, well, just start with that.
I mean, I could talk on this topic for like another hour, right? Like AI is something I'm really interested in. A lot of my job is starting to turn into hardcore prompt engineering. So I am spending a lot of time with ChatGPT, AutoGPT, and I've been experimenting with training my own language models. I definitely think this is shepherding a new innovation in human development. And it's kind of scary at the same time, right? The more I play with artificial intelligence, the more I start to doubt what I've thought of as human intelligence. Like maybe humans aren't as intelligent as I thought. Like maybe what I felt as like being special isn't actually that special. We're starting to learn how to replicate it with the machine. I am a little bit scared as well about what the future awaits, what awaits in the future. Like, what if we do develop some kind of intelligence that we can scale just by throwing compute into it, and all of a sudden we create something that's like a million times smarter than us? I don't think humans have good intuition on what it's like to deal with something that is a lot smarter than us. It's like if you try and play chess with a supercomputer, the supercomputer always wins. So I'm kind of scared that we develop something where the intelligence difference between us and the computer is like the intelligence difference between humans and ants. And like, yeah, it's just like, how do you contend with something that's that much more intelligent than you? You can see throughout history, there's not a good history of like less intelligent things controlling more intelligent things. It's like, it's always been the case that the more intelligent things end up controlling the less intelligent things. So I am really excited about AI. I'm using it all the time, but I am also really scared about what the future holds for us. I mean, these are worst case scenarios of like AI taking us over, but even if it doesn't take us over, how do we live in a world where we have like nothing of economic value to offer, right? Like a lot of our living is made on being smart or doing intellectual pursuits. What do we actually offer the world when our intelligence no longer has any value?
Yeah, there's some unique perspectives on this, right? When you look at, like Ray Kurzweil or Max Tegmark, they've been chatting about this for years, talking about this singularity coming where human intelligence and machine intelligence are imperceptible. And what really comes down to is what was the last input? How are these machines programmed at the end? How are they going to act moving forward? There's always going to be stuff that maybe organics are a little bit better at than a machine, but it's hard to say where all this is going to land. So to kind of tie this back in, how do you think it's affecting the MEV landscape now? And where do you think that it could be at in 5 years, given everything with AI? Because it sounds like a lot of what you do is fairly automated. Even if you're programming it and developing it, the actual execution is automated. And maybe it sounds like you're doing prompt engineering, maybe you're searching for a few things in there as well. I'm curious your take on how this fits in, how AI fits into MEV.
How do I merge AI and crypto? Like right
Yes.
now, I don't have a great merge between AI and crypto. I use AI to assist my programming and to assist my writing. We're not at the stage now where like AI can run MEV. Obviously, I think if progress continues, we will get to that stage. But I actually think that MEV extraction is quite an intellectual activity compared to a lot of other pursuits. And by the time AI gets to the point where it can do all the MEV extraction for me, it's going to have heralded a lot of other changes in the world already. So I do a lot of writing as well. I enjoy writing, but I think that MEV is like a more difficult task than good writing, for example. So I mean, I don't mean any insults to writers by saying that, but I just think that by the time AI is like taking over MEV, there's like a bunch of other stuff it will have taken over first, and the world will have, like the world as we know it will have changed. Is there application of AI to trading strategies? Definitely, yeah. And I think this is already a big field of research in traditional markets, although I'm not aware of any firms at the moment that are like doing a lot of stuff with AI and MEV. But definitely I could see that happening in the future. Although I think that would be more on the statistical side, a lot like running statistical strategies where AI is kind of guiding the interpretation of signals.
Yeah, more with like a bespoke development, probably not using Chat GPT 4, but more of a, yeah, like you said, a statistical model makes sense. Okay. Um, so it sounds like you're not necessarily using it right now with MEV, but in the future, potentially, I mean that it could touch everything in the near future.
I would be first on the bandwagon for sure. Like if I saw application of AI and MEV, I love AI, I love MEV, so that would be like the perfect intersection of my interests.
Yeah,
Like
great.
AI is a, I'm glad you asked me actually about this because AI is like the only thing that I'm as passionate about as MEV.
Really? How long you been passionate about AI? Is this something that's, been on your mind for a while or kind of with new recent developments?
It's been on my mind since before ChatGPT, but not that long before ChatGPT. A friend of mine, his name's Grug, he's a MEV searcher as well, kind of pilled me on AI once when we met in London a little while back. So this was prior to the release of ChatGPT, and he told me, like, Nathan, your whole model on AI is incorrect. You have this idea that AI is going to replace menial trades and services first, but actually it's the knowledge workers and the intellectual workers who are going to be put out first by AI. I started thinking about it at that point, but it didn't become that salient to me until the release of ChatGPT. And I remember using ChatGPT for the first time, thinking like, "Holy shit, Grug was right." Like I could see that he was sort of correct the whole time in his intuition. So yeah, been been thinking about it for a while. It's a topic that I'm very passionate about.
Yeah, it's very interesting, right? It is we had the Industrial Revolution, which displaced a lot of, labor force. And now it's a completely different type of labor force, right? It's jobs that people absolutely love doing. It's writing and creative and knowledge worker type stuff. And as that stuff starts to get kind of moved out, it gets a little bit tricky. People maybe can't see where things are headed, and anytime there's uncertainty, people get nervous.
Maybe I just go back to being like a farmer or something.
Yeah, 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 exactly. I mean, and maybe that's where people will be needed. So
People might just be needed at the point where like machines can't usefully do things. Like machines aren't good at farming, like or other things that involve like using your hands a lot, right? So I could see us just kind of serving the machines and doing these menial tasks that machines can't easily do. Like, it's cheaper to incentivize a human to do this task than to build a robot that can do it, for example.
yeah, yeah, that's the interesting part, right? Is it's like they can start to figure out the incentives that we need. And if you start to really, extrapolate it out, it's like, okay, so, once it reaches closer to the final form, are is it that they are serving us and they would just want us to be happy, or do they start to get objectives of their own? And what exactly does that look like? Granted, I do
I
think
think
compared to GPT-4, we're far off from that. But who knows how far it is? Technology is exponential; it's not linear. Like biology, evolution is linear. Technology is exponential. It's always been that way.
Yeah, I'm not worried about ChatGPT 4 or even 5. It's a kind of ChatGPT 10, like that level of iteration is the point where I get scared. And I agree with you totally. Like, I think it's likely that we would end up serving the AI if the AI is far more advanced than us. I think the birds analogy is a good one, right? Like, we coexist with birds and we're all a lot smarter than birds. And generally, we just let birds live and enjoy their lives. We just sort of let the birds live in peace. And the birds don't really understand what we're doing. But if we ever have some kind of desire and it conflicts with the desire of birds, we just kill the birds by the millions and we don't even think twice about it, right? We build a shopping mall with birds. So like we're kind of creating something that might regard us the way that we regard birds. This isn't my
Mhm.
analogy. I got it from Sam Harris, but I think it's a good analogy for this situation.
Yeah, yeah, it comes down to that last input. What are they what's it programmed to do? What's it aligned with doing? Is it aligned with making everybody happy, or is it aligned with some other corporate objective? We don't know, and we won't know until we get to that point.
I mean, look, if it's that much smarter than us, maybe we can just assume that it knows better than us what's good for us.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the other assumption, right? Is that if it is programmed in a way to help us, we're heading down a good path, and it can make a lot of people a lot happier, healthier, whatever it might be, or we end up in the matrix. Who knows?
Yeah. Let's hope it's a positive externality of the AI creation.
Yeah. Okay, so back to MEV. Could you give a little bit of a background of, how you got into it? If you were to do it all over again, is there a different place that you would start? I'm guessing the landscape's changed considerably since you started. So like, what would it look like if you're trying to get started now? Somebody who might be listening to this thinking that they want to get involved with MEV, do they just need a validator and some coding skills? What does it take?
If I was getting to MEV now, I would definitely try and join a team that was already doing MEV because the barriers to entry now are quite high for a solo searcher. There are some people who can come in and do it by themselves, but that is very rare. When I first started as a searcher, it wasn't a widely known activity. So I would look for what other people were doing on chain and I would essentially reverse engineer their transactions to start to build a smart contract that could execute the same trade that they executed and then from that go back and reverse engineer the bot to actually execute the trades. And sometimes opportunities would hang around for a long time. I remember seeing arbitrage opportunities on chain that would exist for hours and everyone would be, or I guess other people were racing, but I would be racing to launch the smart contract to actually extract this opportunity. The landscape has completely changed. Now, if there's an on-chain arbitrage opportunity, it's going to be snapped up the same block that it was created, and people are going to be fighting over over it in the mempool. So that has changed a lot. The barriers to entry are definitely higher, but I still think it's space for people to get involved. You would just probably want to join a team now if you're a newbie and you're looking to get involved.
So joining a team, like what's the size of your team and are you guys expanding? What does a MEV team consist of? What's kind of who's in there?
I'd say the typical team size is around 4 to 20 people, and we are expanding at the moment. So we have a couple of roles open at the moment that we have job adverts out. I know I said at the beginning of this interview I didn't have any specific asks, but I guess yeah, if you are have the relevant experience, you're looking to join a team, we are hiring at the moment. So please apply if it fits your expertise.
Okay, great. That sounds very exciting. Um, so I think you've answered a lot of my questions. We've covered a lot of ground. Is there anything else you want to add before we sign off?
No specifics to add, but yeah, it's been an interesting chat, and I guess I'll thank you for throwing AI in there as well. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it was great to chat with somebody about that as well. So thank you for your time, Nathan. Have a good one.
Thanks, Derek.
Bye.